Welcome, folks. So today we are going to be talking about nouns, and our discussion of nouns will begin with a few key terms, the nominative and the accusative cases. So let's take a look here. We'll look at how nouns are used as subjects in sentences and how they're used as direct objects. Those technical terms that we were looking at before, sorry, there's a cat playing around down here, are called cases. That nominative and accusative are cases. Those are specific ways that a noun sounds and specific uses that the noun experiences. So let's take a look at just what nouns are. Nouns can be, oof, hold on a second here. Nouns can be people. There we go, there's a person. Nouns can be places. And nouns can be things. So we can include abstract ideas here, but basically if you can kick it, it's a noun. All right. So let's take a look at some subject uses of nouns. Here we've got a picture of a boy, and we can say that the boy smiles. Here, the sentence is about the boy. We have this verb, smiles. So here's the subject. And smiles is a verb. In Latin, the verb typically describes the subject. So it's giving us all of this information about what the subject does, when the subject does something, all that good stuff. In Latin, the way that we would say this is, well, let's stick with English, I guess, for now. This is me from a couple of years ago. And we'd say I, which is our subject here. I smile. And there's our verb. And you can see that this verb is kind of describing what the subject does. And in English, the verb to changes a little bit depending on what the subject is. It has to describe different subjects a little differently. Okay. So a direct object is part of that description. Not every sentence has one, but we could say, for example, the dog wears a hat. So the dog is our subject. Wears is part of the thing, part of the sentence that's describing the dog. And this whole thing that includes the verb and what kind of orbits or is dependent on the verb is what we call the predicate. And this element right here, a hat, that's our direct object. So called because it's kind of like the verb is directly operating on that. So the dog wears a hat. Here's another picture of me. Say I, there's our subject, wear a hat. There's our predicate. Predicate. And you can see in English, we've got a little bit of a difference between how the verb reacts to the subject. But a hat is said the same way, whatever the subject is. The direct object, that is said the same way, whatever the subject is, direct object. Okay. So that conceptually is our subject and direct object. Now, Latin does not have to function the same way English does. You might have noticed that all of the subjects that we used before in English came at the beginning of the sentence, right? There's our subject. Here's our verb. In Latin, rather than using this word order, like rather than saying that the subject has to be the first thing in the sentence, in Latin, the subject has to be in the nominative case. So it could appear anywhere in the sentence. It could be the last word of the sentence, but it has to sound a certain way. So here's an example where our Latin does mimic English word order pretty closely. We have puella, there's our subject. Puella just means girl. And widet is our verb again. So widet verb is part of the predicate. Okay. Now, different words will sound differently when they're in the nominative case. Here, you'd say that the boy student works, where the boy student is our subject, and works is our verb and is the whole predicate all by itself. For the particular Latin word that means boy student, its nominative sounds a little different. And notice in this sentence, it comes second. But this is the nominative case form of the subject for boy student, which is discipulus. Think like disciple. And we can tell just by the sound of this word, discipulus specifically is that last element there, that it's the subject, even though it comes last in the sentence. Let's take a look at one more example of the nominative for subjects. Here's a dog. The dog runs. No surprise here. In English, the subject is the first word in the sentence. Here's our predicate. And in Latin, the word dog, when it's the subject, sounds like this. It says con is currit. So there's our subject. We can tell because the word dog ends in is, canis. We know that's the subject. It is in the nominative case. And that's how we know it's the subject. All right. All right. Now, all by itself, this might seem a little confusing. What I'm doing talking about the nominative, and we look at these three different words, and they have different sounds at the end of them, and I'm telling you that they're all in the nominative case and they're all subjects. Well, this makes a lot more sense when we start comparing it to other cases, and that's what we'll do right now. We're going to look at the accusative case, and this gets used for quite a few things in Latin, but especially, and what our focus is right now, it's being used for direct objects. And these are the things that are kind of directly operated on by verbs. So here we've got another group of people interacting. We can say he, it's this guy, there's our subject. Here's our predicate. Right, this is describing the subject's action, all of that. And the girl is our direct object. Again, Latin does not require that the direct object be the element that comes right after the verb. Instead, Latin requires that the direct object be in the accusative case. So here we see that we don't actually have to express the subject. If it's he in Latin, we can just leave that out. We've got puellam, which is in the accusative case. And so we know it's the direct object. You might remember from the previous slide, when this word for girl in Latin is the subject, it doesn't sound like this. Instead, it's just puella. That would be the nominative form. But we have the accusative form, so we know it's the direct object. So if we had to translate this, we would know direct object. In English, we would translate it after the verb, because that's the English rule for direct objects. Okay. Let's try this here. We can say, it bores, this whole situation, it bores the boy student, where it is our subject, bores the boy student, is describing that situation, so there's our predicate. And in English, the direct object is the thing that comes right after the verb, So there's our direct object. Remember, the word order is not the significant feature here. The significant feature is the case in Latin. So now we've got an opposite order of our words. Verb was first in the sentence, or it was second in the sentence. Sorry, verb is first in the sentence. The direct object in the accusative case was first in this sentence, and here it's second. So this is the accusative form of the word for boy, student. And because it's the accusative form, in this sentence we know it's the direct object. For this word, you might remember that it, when it was nominative, when it was a subject, was not discipulum. Instead, it was discipulus. That was the nominative form. That would make it the subject of this sentence. But we've got the accusative form here, so we know it's the direct object. Finally, let's look at this picture of a person holding a dog. We can say she holds the dog. Again, here's our predicate. You can probably tell because it's underlined, but it's also coming right after the verb. The dog is our direct object. And in Latin, again, the word order will not tell us the relationships. What will tell us the relationships is the case. And our word for dog now, canem, is in the accusative case. And so we know that it is the direct object, even though it comes first in the sentence. Now, you may remember here, this word, when it was the subject, didn't sound like canem. This word sounded like canis when it was the subject. Okay, so what did we do? We looked at subjects, and we talked a lot about subjects and the difference in English and Latin. We said in English, typically, it's identified by being the first word in the sentence. The direct object said in English, we can usually identify because it comes right after the verb. But in Latin, we didn't use that. Instead, we relied on cases. And the nominative case shows you when you have a subject, and the accusative case shows you when you have a direct object, among other things that we'll talk about later. Okay, that is what we've got for today. Nouns, subjects, direct objects, cases, nominative, accusative. Have at it. All right, well, day.